Brother Sibusiso. Do stay on the line. We're going to come back to you in a sec. We just want to introduce the spiritual leader of the Alkebu-Lan revivalist movement, Brother Leader Mbanda. Katenda Mwari, Brother Leader.
Tena Mwari, Brother Shakara. Tena Mwari, giving thanks and praises and bringing greetings to all who are listening into this very, very important program this evening as we pay tribute to an outstanding stalwart for the total liberation of our African continent and our African people worldwide. Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari, Brother Leader.
Tendai Mwari. Right, Brother Leader. As you know, we were scheduled to deal with the issue of land in South Africa today, and it just so happens that Mama Nomzamo chose this day to ascend into the ancestral realm. So, and as we know, the legacy of our mother is inextricably linked to this issue of land in Azania, South Africa. So we're taking this opportunity to highlight both of those issues. But I want to begin by asking you, what is the importance of Queen Mama Nomzamo Madikizela to us as a people and the African world community?
Tendai Mwari. Well, let me first and foremost extend our deepest condolence and commiseration to the Mandela family and to all members of the wider family network and social network who knew Mama Nomzamo Madikizela Mandela closely and intimately, had personal relationships with her. The ripple effect of her passing is so strong and so powerful. It's hard to imagine what it must be like from close proximity. I send particular condolence to the immediate family, her daughters. I think her daughters are
Zinzi
and Zanani.
Mm-hmm.
We send our condolence to them and to their children. I know she had grandchildren and possibly great-grandchildren, to all of them from the Alkebu-Lan revivalist movement, and indeed from Africa, UK, and I'm sure from Africans around the world. We extend our deepest condolence.
Mm-hmm.
This is, you ask, what is the significance of the legacy of Mama Nomzamo Madikizela Mandela?
Mm-hmm.
Well, she was a giant amongst giants. You know, the war for liberation, the resistance that was taking place in Azania was so intense and so fiery. Yet she stood up. She stood firm. She was such an inspiration. She was the axis around which much of what we saw within the African world in terms of the resistance movement in Azania revolved. She was such a powerful figure that the legacy of Mama Nomzamo as an African woman who was a mother, she was by profession a social worker, who was very, very popular in her community, just as someone who was loving and caring, someone that many saw as a confidant, as a nurturer, someone who many in the community, when you hear people talk about her, she was someone that many people turned to for support, comfort, and just for friendship. In addition to all of that, she was a warrior queen, someone who was thrust into the forefront because of circumstances, the imprisonment of her husband, Nelson Mandela, his imprisonment, and the brutal treatment of our people forced her to step up and step forward as an African woman and provide the kind of leadership that ensured that not only was her husband's name kept in the forefront. Not only was he not forgotten, he and other political prisoners of that contemporary time.
Yes, sir.
But that the resistance was maintained robustly and vigorously. And it is said that when her mother was expecting her, both her mother and father were expecting a boy or were wishing for a boy.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, as she was growing up, she took on what would have been considered as male characteristics.
Yes.
She was a match for many young men of her age at the time,
mm-hmm.
In terms of her physical prowess.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it is known that in fact there's a famous interview where she was asked about her role and her commitment in the political battle that unfolded in Azania, South Africa, and she was quick to emphasize that it was not just the political battle
yes
that she engaged with, but the physical battle.
yes
I heard earlier on a clipping that was played where she said that we don't have arms,
mm-hmm.
but we have stones, we have boxes of matches.
Yes.
He didn't play the rest of it, but
Yes.
she also said in that clip, she raised her fist and she said, we have this fist,
Yes.
As an indication that she was of the character that would get stuck in, and get busy when she needed to, and she certainly did get stuck in and get physically busy in the physical fight for our people's liberation. So the legacy is a tremendous legacy.
Mm-hmm.
I, as an African man, was always inspired whenever I saw her, clippings that we saw during that feverish time in Azania, South Africa. But even now, when you hear her speak,
mm-hmm.
there is a certain depth, there is a certain
Word sound,
soulfulness to her utterances that it really penetrates and it really moves you.
Mm-hmm.
She is certainly someone who has been a great inspiration for me, a great inspiration for the Alkebu-Lan revival.
That's right. That's
Yes,
right.
sir.
And a tremendous inspiration for African people worldwide.
Tendai Mwari, give thanks for that, brother leader. Right, do we have you for a while?
Yes, I'll hold on for as long as I
Possibly can. Good.
can.
Okay, so I'll ask you another question. Then we'll relate the legacy of Queen Mama Nomzamo to this land issue, as we discussed with both yourself and brother Sibu Zizo. One of the things that we have to touch on, brother leader.
Can I just take this opportunity to hail brother Sibu Zizo for his work and for the work of his organization. We give thanks and praises that we are able to have him on our show this evening, especially to make pronouncements on the person and legacy of Mama Nomzamo Madikizela Mandela.
Tendai Mwari.
Give thanks, my
Give
brother.
thanks.
Yeah.
I was okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, brother leader, because in the 90s, the African world, the Pan-African community was on guard very much in regard to the name and the character of Mama Nomzamo Madikizela. And I do want to touch on this, and this is specifically because the news media right now is doing a very diplomatic hit job on our mama. And referencing certain incidents and court cases that she trumped up, court cases, charges against her name from the 90s up until now. So I really just want to give our listeners some tools of analysis and tools of war, really. But we were on the front line of that battle in terms of defending her name, her character, and her legacy. Can you just put these issues into perspective for our listeners and answer the question, what should be our response to the assassination of the character of Mama Nomzamo Madikizela?
Well, Tendai Mwari, our response, there's a saying that we should be ready and willing to stand up for those who lay down their lives for us.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And Mama Nomzamo Madikizela was in the forefront of that vicious war for liberation, that war that was declared by Europeans who had stolen the land of Azania, huge portions of Azanian land, and had reduced African humanity to slavery. And it was the legacy of that she was at the forefront of resisting. It was a vicious fight for the dignity and for the liberation of our people, for the preservation of the humanity of our people. And this fight had a ripple effect on Africa and every single African on the planet. So she wasn't just fighting for Africans in Azania, she was fighting for Africans worldwide, because the liberation of Africans in Azania was intrinsic to the liberation of African people worldwide. When as she was fighting for liberation, when her husband was arrested, our people in America, on the African continent, were fighting also for their liberation. We're fighting on the African continent for the decolonization of the African continent.
Mm-hmm.
Fighting on in America for the rights, the human rights of African people. And so as far as she was prepared, this is a woman who was arrested. She was on house arrest. We always talk about Nelson Mandela and the 27 years in prison. But Mama Nomzamo was imprisoned. It was called house arrest, but it was imprisonment.
Mm-hmm.
It means that she was confined to her home.
And many people don't know this, brother leader. And this is exactly why I'm asking you this question. You know what I'm saying? And just to exemplify on that point, she actually spent a year and a half in solitary confinement.
Yes, I was coming on to that.
Oh, sorry, I apologize for jumping the gun.
In addition to being under house arrest, she was also incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
And within the context of that incarceration, because she refused to be dehumanized, she refused to repudiate the fight for the liberation of Africans in Azania, she was put in solitary confinement for a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And when you hear her describe the level of torture and abuse that she suffered,
yes, sir,
whilst she had a heart condition as well, and she was sure that they believed that she would have collapsed and died under the torture and the vicious solitary conditions of solitary confinement.
Yes, sir.
But somehow she survived it, and she said the loneliness of the most painful aspect was the loneliness, not having anybody for months and months and months to converse with. So much so that she said if a cockroach entered her cell, that was company for the day. She would actually talk to the cockroach. Mm-hmm. If an ant entered her cell, she was glad to just see a live creature of nature that she could communicate with to help her to restore her sanity.
Yes,
can you imagine being in a position where you are relying on the creeping, crawling creatures to just enter a little cell that you've been confined to, so that you can converse with that creature in order to sustain or restore your mental health?
Yes, sir.
That is what she has been through. And so we as Africans, who are blessed with some semblance of consciousness, and some self-dignity, must realize that it is our responsibility to stand up at this time and defend the name, the spirit, and the legacy of Mama Nomzamo Madikizela Mandela. And as I failed to do so earlier on, let me say now in the words of our great ancestors, may her soul, her blessed soul, as we sing praise songs, we sing our praise songs to her legacy, to her name, for her great work. May her soul, may the spirits of Muzimu Mukulu, the great ancestors, gather around her in multitudes at this time.
Yes, indeed.
And bring warmth and protection to her spirit, so that it may rise like Ra on the wings of Ma'at.
Yes, sir.
After a favorable judgment in the council of Asar. Ashe.
Ashe.
Ra
Amen.
Amen.
is done. Tendai mwari.
Tendai mwari.
Tendai mwari.
Tendai mwari.